Introduction. When a smile hid a collapse. People often say, the postpartum period is the happiest time in a woman's life. And then we see pictures, a mother holding her baby, smiling at the camera, soft light, everything looking perfect. No one knows that, right after that moment, there might be a sleepless night. A woman sitting against the bathroom wall, her hands trembling, tears falling silently. Postpartum depression doesn't enter a woman's life with loud cries. It comes very quietly, like a prolonged, inexplicable fatigue. Like a feeling of emptiness even while holding her newborn child. Some mothers aren't sad, they just no longer feel anything. It's no longer joy, nor exactly pain, it's just the feeling of being outside of one's own life. The scariest thing isn't the sadness. It's the silence. Silence because of the fear of judgment. Silence because of the thought, if I speak out, will anyone believe me? Will I be seen as a bad mother? And so they smile, they nod, they say they're okay, while inside, little by little, they are silently crumbling. This video isn't about weakness. It's about women who have been holding on for too long, just to maintain a smile. Postpartum depression doesn't start with tears. When postpartum depression is mentioned, many people still picture a woman sobbing, collapsing, unable to care for her child. But the truth is, most cases of postpartum depression don't begin with tears. It starts with very small things. Waking up one morning feeling more tired than usual, even though you haven't done anything else. A heavy feeling in your chest, but not clear enough to call it sadness. It's just a lack of energy to care about anything. There are mothers who don't cry. They still do everything. Breastfeeding, changing diapers, cleaning the house. They still reply to messages, still smile when visitors come. But inside, they feel like they're operating like a machine, living, but not truly present. Postpartum depression often begins with emotional numbness. The woman no longer feels joy when her baby smiles, but also doesn't feel sad enough to cry. Just a prolonged void, day after day. Many mothers panic because of this void. They ask themselves, why am I not as happy as everyone says? Why don't I feel connected to my baby immediately? And then, they turn that doubt on themselves. They don't think they are depressed. They think they are selfish, ungrateful, inadequate. That perhaps they are not good enough to be a mother. This makes postpartum depression dangerous. Because when a woman doesn't cry, doesn't complain, doesn't ask for help, it's easy to be overlooked. Family looks at her and says, she's fine. Society looks at her and thinks, she's much luckier than many others. But no one sees the long, sleepless nights when a mother lies beside her child with an empty heart. No one hears the silent dialogue in their head, what am I doing wrong? If I disappear, maybe everything will be easier for everyone. The important thing is, postpartum depression doesn't always come with suicidal thoughts. Many women don't want to die. They just want to stop this feeling of exhaustion. They want a moment of peace, a refuge, where they don't have to try to be a perfect mother. They don't want to leave their child. They are just exhausted from pretending to be okay every day. That prolonged silence gradually wears down the woman. Not in a day, but little by little. Each meal loses its appeal. Each moment loses its emotion. Each time they tell themselves, just a little more. And by the time tears appear, if they do appear, the depression has already been there for a long time. So, if you ever think, I don't cry, so I'm probably okay. Know this, postpartum depression doesn't need tears to survive. It only needs silence. And that silence, if prolonged, can make a woman disappear from her own life. The pressure to be happy, the hidden knife behind the wishes. Immediately after giving birth, a woman is often surrounded by many kind words. Congratulations. Having a child is such a blessing. You'll get used to it. Motherhood is a sacred duty. These words aren't malicious. They are spoken out of concern, out of the belief that the mother should be happy. But that very word, should, over time, becomes a heavy pressure. Because when everyone wants you to be happy, you start to ask yourself, if I'm not happy, where does it all be to blame? The pressure to be happy doesn't appear as a clear command. It seeps in gradually through glances, Through the way people only ask about the baby, forgetting to ask about the mother. Through unintentional comparisons. I was even worse off back then and I was fine. People long to have children but can't. Gradually, the woman learned one thing. Her true feelings had no place. If she was tired, it was because she wasn't used to it. If she was sad, it was because she was overthinking. If she felt empty, it was because she hadn't tried hard enough. No one directly told her she was wrong, but every response made her feel, it's better to stay silent. And so the silence began. The mother smiled when guests arrived, nodded when asked, said, I'm fine, as a reflex. Not because it was the truth, but because saying otherwise seemed too much trouble. Troublesome because she had to explain. Troublesome because she was afraid of being judged. Troublesome because she didn't know if anyone was really listening. This pressure is especially heavy for women who are strong. Those who are used to fending for themselves. Those who have overcome many difficult phases in their lives. They find it even harder to allow themselves to be weak. They think, I've accomplished so much already, why can't I? But motherhood is unlike any previous role. There are no breaks, there are no clear measures, and no timely recognition. When a mother is unhappy, she not only faces her own sadness, but also the feeling that she is doing something terribly wrong. Wrong for not being as happy as expected. Wrong for not being grateful enough. Wrong for not living up to the image of the mother that society portrays. The heartbreaking thing is, the more she tries to appear happy, the further she drifts from her true feelings. They begin to doubt their own feelings. They begin to deny their exhaustion. They begin to tell themselves, maybe I'm just being too sensitive. And when they no longer trust their own feelings, the mother gradually loses the ability to ask for help. Not because they don't need help, but because they don't know if they are allowed to ask for help. The pressure to be happy thus becomes a hidden knife. It doesn't hurt immediately, but day by day, little by little, it cuts the woman's connection with herself. Until they break down, people are astonished and ask, why didn't you say so sooner? But perhaps, they weren't allowed to say it from the beginning. The body changes, but no one prepares the mind. After childbirth, a woman's body changes in ways no guidebook can fully describe. These changes happen very quickly, and often, people only talk about them with short phrases, you'll recover. Just rest and you'll be fine. But very few people say, not only the body needs to recover. The mind does too. Immediately after giving birth, a woman's hormones plummet. Estrogen and progesterone, hormones that directly affect emotions, drop to low levels in a short period. At the same time, there is prolonged sleep deprivation, physical pain, and a new, never-ending responsibilities. The body changes every day. Breast pain. The abdomen hasn't recovered yet. Stretch marks. Nameless fatigue. But the woman doesn't have time to stop and appreciate all of that. Because the baby needs to eat, needs to be held, needs constant care, and so they learn to neglect themselves. Many mothers describe this feeling as living in a strange body. They look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman in front of them. Not because their appearance has changed, but because their eyes are no longer the same as before. An invisible gap forms between mind and body. The body still functions, but the mind is tired, confused, and gradually becoming exhausted. Sadly, postpartum women are often only asked about what their bodies are doing. Is there enough milk? Is the baby sleeping well? When are you going back to work? Very rarely is anyone asked, are you okay? Do you still feel like yourself? When the mind is neglected, signs of mental fatigue begin to appear. Difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness, irritability over small things, feeling overwhelmed even by familiar tasks. The mother doesn't understand what's happening. They think they're getting weaker, that they're no longer as quick-witted as before, that perhaps they're going downhill. But the truth is, the brain is operating in a state of exhaustion. Lack of sleep doesn't just make people sleepy. It reduces the ability to regulate emotions. It makes small worries seem big. It makes negative thoughts harder to control. At the same time, the woman has to adapt to a completely new role. A role with no apprenticeship period. No safe trial and error phase. Every decision is tied to the tiny life before her. And every mistake, however small, can cause a mother to blame herself intensely. Her mind is stretched between worry, responsibility, and exhaustion. But no one stops to say, this is difficult, and just because you find it difficult doesn't mean you've failed. Society prepares women for many things before childbirth. Baby clothes, a room, a shopping list. But very little preparation is given for something equally important, the feeling of disorientation after childbirth. The feeling of no longer being oneself. The feeling of needing time to readjust to oneself. When this is not understood, women easily believe that all the difficulties they face are due to their own lack of strength. And this false belief is fertile ground for postpartum depression to take root. The silent breakdown, when the mother gradually disappears. The breakdown caused by postpartum depression rarely happens suddenly. It's not like a sudden, hard fall that everyone notices immediately. It's more like a gradual withdrawal little by little until the woman realizes she's no longer there. The mother still wakes up every morning, still takes care of the baby, still does what needs to be done. But something has changed. They speak less, smile less, no longer share their thoughts. Not because there's nothing to say, but because they don't know where to begin. Silence becomes a refuge. There, they don't have to explain. They don't have to face the incomprehensible stares. They didn't want to hear any more advice that would make them feel wrong. Initially, they just wanted some quiet time. But then the quiet dragged on. And in that silence, the mother gradually lost her sense of connection with the world around her. They were in the midst of family, but felt like outsiders. They heard laughter and conversation, but couldn't truly touch. There were moments when the mother looked at her child for a long time and wondered, why don't I feel the things I should feel? That question wasn't spoken. It was buried deep in fear. Fear that if they spoke it, they would be seen as heartless, as a bad mother. And so they chose to disappear in a different way, not leaving, but no longer fully present. They cared for their child out of responsibility, not out of connection. They did the right thing, but no longer felt anything. This breakdown is hard to see from the outside. Because the mother is still doing well, still fulfilling her duties, still not causing trouble, but inside, they are slowly emptying. Some mothers describe this feeling as dissolving, not intensely painful, but weary, prolonged, and lonely. They don't think about leaving life, but they think about ceasing to exist. Not because they don't love their family, but because they are so exhausted that they no longer recognize who they are. The heartbreaking thing is, many women believe this disappearance is their choice. That they are weak, that they are not strong enough to be mothers. But the reality is, no one can be fully present when they have suffered for too long in silence. When they are not listened to, when their feelings are denied, when exhaustion is taken for granted. The breakdown doesn't come in a single moment. It comes from hundreds of days during which the mother tells herself, just a little more. Don't bother anyone, everyone else is busier than me. Until a certain point, they no longer have the strength to keep going. And that's when the mother begins to disappear, not from the family, but from herself. If there's one thing that needs to be said here, it's this. This disappearance isn't a personal failure. It's a sign of someone who has tried too long without enough support. And if you recognize yourself in these lines, know that your exhaustion doesn't mean you don't love your child. Your feeling of emptiness doesn't mean you're a bad mother. It just means you are human too, and you've needed help for a very long time. Why calling it weakness is a cruel mistake. When a woman collapses after giving birth, people often look for a simple explanation. She's weak, she's in poor mental health, she doesn't know how to think positively. These statements sound concise, but that very conciseness hides a serious mistake, blaming the person, instead of looking at the circumstances. Calling postpartum depression weakness is not only wrong, it is cruel, because postpartum depression is not a lack of willpower. It's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of love for the child. It is the result of many overlapping factors: physiological, psychological, living circumstances, lack of support, and prolonged isolation. No woman enters postpartum depression without having tried. They tried sleeping less to care for their baby. Try to push fatigue aside. Try to smile so as not to worry anyone. Try to be a good mother, according to every standard. If that is weakness, it is a kind of weakness built from extraordinary endurance. The reality is, many mothers with postpartum depression are once very strong women. They used to work independently. They used to overcome difficulties. They used to be a support for others. Therefore, they are less likely to ask for help. It is harder for them to admit they are not okay. They try to cope on their own until they are completely exhausted. Calling them weak is denying all those efforts. The more dangerous it is, when society labels them weak, the women begin to believe that label. They blame themselves. They feel ashamed of their own emotions. They think they don't deserve help. And so they fall silent again. The word weak becomes a wall. It prevents the mother from speaking out. It prevents the family from listening. It prevents the community from recognizing postpartum depression as a real mental health problem. We wouldn't call someone with a broken leg weak because they can't run. So why call someone with an exhausted brain weak because they can't cheer up? The brain is also part of the body, and when it's under excessive pressure for a long time, it will react. Not with laziness, but with collapse. Mothers with postpartum depression don't lack strength. They lack support. They lack real rest. Lack of being listened to without judgment. Lack of being acknowledged that what they are going through is difficult, and it is real. Calling them weak only adds another burden on their already overloaded shoulders. The right thing to say is, the depressed mother is someone who has fought a long battle in a war few people see. And their breaking point is not because they are incompetent, but because no one can remain strong forever in solitude. If we truly want to protect postpartum women, the first thing to do is to stop using the word weak. Replace it with understanding, with the question, what are you going through? With the presence, you don't have to go through this alone. Because acknowledging the pain does not weaken the mother. It is the first step for them to stand strong again. What women need is not advice, but acknowledgement. When a postpartum woman starts saying she's not okay, the first thing she usually gets is not listening, but advice. Cheer up, think a little more positively. It'll be all right, get enough sleep and you'll be fine. These words rarely come with malice. They are said because the listener wants to help, wants to fix, wants to make the sadness disappear as quickly as possible. But the pain doesn't need to be fixed immediately. It needs to be acknowledged first. Because when a woman shares, what she is doing is not asking for a solution. She is checking whether her feelings are allowed to exist. When we respond with advice, we inadvertently send a different message. This feeling isn't right. You should feel differently. You need to change. And so the woman learns that her weariness is something to hide. That her feelings are upsetting to others. That speaking out only complicates things. What they really need is very simple. Not someone telling them what to do, but someone sitting down and saying, what you're feeling is real. You're not imagining it. You're not wrong. Acknowledgement has immense power. It doesn't solve the problem immediately, but it soothes feelings of loneliness. When a mother is acknowledged, she no longer has to fight her own emotions alone. She no longer has to suffer and doubt herself because of that pain. Many women say that just one sentence, "I believe in you," is enough to make them cry. Not because they are weak, but because finally, someone sees them. Acknowledgement doesn't mean agreeing with every negative thought. It means, we don't deny the experience of someone who is hurting. We can say, I see you're very tired. It sounds like you've been holding on for a long time. This really isn't easy. These words don't make the woman sink deeper. On the contrary, they create a safe ground for her to stand firm and recover. When no longer judged, the woman dares to speak more truthfully. About her fears, about her emptiness, about the thoughts that shame her. And when she can speak them out, the pain no longer has to exist in the shadows. What postpartum women need is not someone to tell them to be strong, but someone to allow them to be tired. Not someone to tell them to love their child more, but someone to understand that loving their child doesn't make them immune to exhaustion. Acknowledgement is also what helps mothers dare to seek professional help. Because when they no longer feel wrong, they will no longer feel ashamed to say, I need help. No recovery begins with denial. It begins the moment someone is told, you are not alone. What you are going through is difficult. You deserve to be cared for. And sometimes, that's all a woman needs to begin to reconnect with herself. Conclusion. Not weakness, but having endured for too long. If there's one thing that needs to be reiterated here, it's this. Postpartum depression doesn't break a woman because she's weak. It breaks her because she's endured too long in silence. Enduring changes no one prepared for. Enduring the pressure to be happy. Enduring always putting herself last. And enduring the fear that if she speaks out, she'll be judged. A mother with postpartum depression doesn't lack love. Doesn't lack effort. She just lacks a safe place to be human before being a mother. If you see yourself in this story, remember, being tired doesn't make you a bad mother. The fact that you need help doesn't take away your worth. You don't have to get through it all alone. You don't have to be stronger. Just be seen, be acknowledged, be supported, and if you're not strong enough to speak up today, that's okay. Stay with yourself a little longer. Breathe slowly, and believe that healing doesn't begin with trying harder, but with allowing yourself to be helped. You're not gone, you just need rest.